So hello and welcome. Happy Friday. Today is Friday, February the 4th, and this is episode number 145 of Backyard Beekeeping Questions and Answers. It's 18 degrees outside, as you saw in the opening, lots of snow still, and it's -8 Celsius. So, my name is Frederick Dunn, and this is The Way to Bee. I'm super glad that you're here. The questions that we're going to go over today were submitted during the past week, and you can see what the questions will be in order by looking down in the video description. There's also going to be some nice links down there for you, so that's pretty much it. Let's get started. So the first question, hi Fred, you have inspired me to purchase a microscope. I'm sorry, I hope you're not in trouble for going shopping. Admittedly, I know absolutely nothing about microscopes, and I'm curious if you have any advice on brands or features I should look for or watch out for. Thanks, and so on. This is from Scott Taylor, East Fork Apiary, Springfield, Ohio. So anyway, I thought about it. I do use the Celestron stereo microscopes. In fact, stereo microscopes are all I use. What the heck is that? Well, two optics. The other thing is, for consideration, because I don't want you to just jump out and grab one without fitting what you want to do with it. So me, for example, I take pictures, make videos and stuff. So having a microscope that I can put an adapter on, in this case for Nikon DSLR cameras, they sell adapters specific to the camera make that you have. You'll be able to put a camera on your microscope and photograph and or video also what you're seeing. There's also something called a dark field microscope, and that's where the plate sits down there and light does not pass through underneath. So then it can show the surface textures and everything else, and then there's a clear field so that the light passes through the bottom. But I have two. The Celestron stereo microscope is important to me. I like it, and if I'm teaching kids, grandkids, nephews, whatever, then that's what I put on the kitchen table and they can look at it. And, you know, the optics are adjustable. Most of them are. Celestron's a good company. It only goes up to 40x. So make sure that the microscope that you're looking for when you're shopping around will give the magnification that you need to see whatever it is that you're wanting to look at. So the other one is my favorite, and the high-end one for me anyway, because they can run into a lot of money, I'm not going to lie. You have an AmScope stereo microscope also. The other thing is microscopes come with their own lighting usually, and that's great. They'll have light from above, light from underneath, both light from above and underneath at the same time. You definitely want one that plugs into the wall. Today, LEDs are really popular because it won't get super hot. So whatever the specimen is that's under your microscope lens, you want to make sure that deck isn't going to get really hot, so some of the tungsten lights and things like that will heat up your specimen. Could actually damage it if it's something living. Because I've even videoed things like zebra danio fish eggs hatching out and things like that. So the higher magnifications run into more money because the lenses are more expensive, and also you want to get the ones that have changeable lenses. And of course, read reviews. Amazon sells them. Depending on what you're going to look for. So anyway, I thought rather than go into huge detail here, I probably should make another video showing the microscope details. I have auxiliary lighting for it too. So I have focused lights on a separate unit that has articulated arms on it, and then they can provide a nice raking light. Lighting straight down onto the subject might be okay, but for me, it exploits the textures and surface area of whatever you're looking at. If you have a raking light, something that comes in horizontal to it, hits it from the side, both sides, one side, whatever you want. So I'm going to make a video and show you that. So then I thought, well, that'd be a great opportunity also to scrape out some dead bees and do an Azima count. So I should how to do that too. Why not? Because that's the greatest magnification for my purposes. So because the more basic, like the 40x microscope by Celestron that I've had for many years, and it really holds up to a lot of abuse, that's kind of considered your dissection microscope. So we're going to move on from that. The other thing is, if you don't want to buy it, by the way, this is where beekeeper associations come into play. maybe you could talk your Beekeepers Association into going in together and buying a microscope that's really good that fellow members could use from time to time. And then you can, of course, prepare and save your own slides and create your own specimen collection and things like that too, so that's fun. Question number 2 comes from Gary, Sisters, Oregon. And my question is, I'm planning on requeening a couple of hives this spring with queens purchased from a regional dealer. If the queen cages come with attendants, would you go the extra step to remove the attendants before inserting the queen and cage between the brood frames in the hive, or would you leave the attendants in the queen cage? Obviously, there's some risk of loss or harm to the queen while trying to remove the attendants. I've read there is a greater acceptance rate of the queen if she decides not to have attendants. So your thoughts on the pros and cons, and if removal of the attendants is recommended, any techniques you think work well. Many thanks. This is a perfect one. Why? Because I have a piece of equipment that I almost never use, but because this question was asked, now I get to demonstrate it to you. Hint, it was, of course, the thumbnail picture for today's presentation, but what I really want to show you first, for those of you who are buying in queens or getting packages, this year you're going to see 2 basic styles of queen cages. Notice this one is nice and big, this one's little. This one comes with just the queen in it and no attending worker bees. This one will come with the queen and workers with her. And this plays on how you're going to position this inside your hive too. Obviously, you want to make sure that they can breathe, so when you put the cage in, you don't push it up against the frame of brood so that you're blocking ventilation there, because we want the bees that are inside your colony to be able to feed and attend to the queen through the screen. But one of the things that comes up is also, so there's a couple of reasons why you might want to remove your attendants. First of all, it's true. Sometimes the bees will reject the queen because the attendants are in the cage with her. It's their pheromone, which is not necessarily the queen's pheromone because they are not from her. They are not her offspring. So another question that comes up, or comments that come up, usually there's a candy plug here. And people suggest don't point the candy plug down, because then if the attendants in there get stung to death by workers in the colony that you're hoping to introduce her into, then the dead bees can plug up that hole and the queen can't get out and they can't get into the queen. So then you put it up so that the dead bees follow the bottom and then the queen goes out through the top. Not an issue at all when all you have is the queen in the cage. And of course, if it comes in a package, they've already pretty much accepted her, so there's not a lot of rejection. This really comes into play when you buy in a queen with her attendants and you have an existing colony that's missing the queen. They are likely to reject the queen, and rejection is increased, as I said before, if she has attendants with her. So now what can we do? We just pull this cork out and then grab the queen and then hold her while the attendants fly away? No. I'm sure everybody has one of these. This is called a queen muff. That's right. Everybody needs one. So let's pretend this is what we would do. We would take the queen in here, and we would, in our other hand, we would have tweezers, of course, and we would put them inside the muff, and we put the cage inside, and now our hands are in here, and we can either pull the screen off the front, or we can pull the cork out, and we can let the workers get out. And then if the queen happens to escape the cage, look, she's inside here. So a couple of things can happen while you've got her in this cage. In the muff, I'm sorry. Now you can catch the queen, you can hold her, and you can mark her with your paint pen. What's the color going to be for this year? Last year was white. This year is going to be a yellow pen. And so you're going to mark her, and you can do that in here, and then you can let her run around and dry off, and then you have to catch her again. But you also now have an opportunity to take her out of this wooden cage, and you can put her in another queen cage style altogether, like the plastic ones, for example. So once she's out inside your little muff area here, pre-stage everything, by the way, put them all in here. Now we have another style that we can put her in and put the queen in here, and then you're going to plug it up with candy, and you can pop open the little entrance there, or you can actually flip the whole thing, and it makes it easier to get the queen in there. And then once you close that, that's queen. And all this happens inside your muff, so you don't lose the queen. Now she's in there. Candy's in there. Some people put marshmallows in there. But you pre-stage and put all your stuff in here. Why is this thing so big? Well, it's so big because it also has a Velcro front. Let me spin it around. See how big this is? Velcro opens up. Why would you need to open up the whole thing? Well, because you can actually take a frame of brood out of your beehive, put the whole single deep frame in here, inside the muff, and then close it up and then work with your bees. And it's all Velcroed shut. Now you're inside here. You can work with the bees and nobody escapes. So, it's called a queen muff. There you go. Brief explanation. Somebody might go, hey, where can I get one of those? So that your wife can be mad at you too, not just because you're buying a microscope, because I said some people write that their wives are very unhappy, or their spouse in general. Might be a husband, because Fred recommended something else that you need to buy. Well, that particular one comes from Better Bee, no big surprise. That's where I do most of my bee equipment shopping, and that thing is $35.75 because I checked the price before I started today's episode. So yeah, that should answer your questions. Yes, get the workers out if you can, if you have a place to contain them, and if you don't have a muff, you're going to need to get one. Word to the wise, I bought that one quite a while ago and I have never used it. So it's good for training so that when somebody asks a question, I have a piece of equipment that they're talking about and we can talk about how it works. So thank you for that question and letting me go out and get that out of my storage area so I could show it today. Question number 3. Ingo Hartig from Raymond, Maine. I have 5 grandchildren and a pool. Once the splashing begins, the bees are there as well, picking up water from the concrete. I would like to build a watering system this spring and train the bees away from the pool. Last season, I used a plastic chicken water system. It was only partially helpful. I'm thinking of using 1/4 inch tubing to bring the water out into the yard and let it drip, perhaps on a timer. Last year, you talked about sea salt and recently about a touch of chlorine. Any advice? Okay, well, a touch of chlorine doesn't hurt the bees, and that's how we keep the waterers clean, by the way. I have what's called a honeybee water oasis. So it's the garden hose oasis. So what I did was I have a manifold that you can connect to your hose bib on the outside of your house, and that lets you run several different hoses away from it. So I like to make it convenient to the beehives, but of course not right next to a beehive. So what it is in the backyard that you saw in the opening today, those hives are in a horseshoe shape. In the center of all that, right next to my grapevines, is my water, my garden hose oasis. And this is a good time to be talking about that because it's about primacy. It's about what your bees find first in spring they continue to go to. So if you can set up a dependable, predictable, consistent source of water that the bees go to, when they start going to that, they continue to go to it. So there's 2 places that my bees go. My garden hose oasis, and of course I have a pond, which again is about, I want to say it's 150 yards from the house. It's only 120 feet apart across, and it is 14 feet deep, and it has some moss along the edges, and the bees love to land on the moss and sip their water through that. So if you want to divert them before those swimming pools open up, even though there's chlorine and everything else, some people filter and treat their water with salts instead of chlorine these days so it doesn't irritate your eyes. But the bees love the minerals, and they're not at all averse to drinking out of a chlorinated source of water. So, setting it up early, making it consistent. Mine like to find their water in the sun. So you can even test this for yourself, another great backyard experiment. Go ahead and set up a water source in the shade, another one in the sun, because maybe where you live, down south somewhere where it gets super hot, desert southwest, putting it in the shade will cut down on the evaporation. And maybe your bees prefer to seek water in the shade than in the sun because the water can also get very hot. The other part of this is the drip part. So there's a lot of free surface area on the water when you set up a bird bath or whatever you decide to use for your bees. if the water's moving. So if there's water dripping and the surface is just gradually moving, there's a little cascade. And mine drips off of a livestock feeder. And I tip it a little bit, goes down the side, and then it drips into 3 different Pyrex clear glass pie plates. So then it drips into this one, drips into this one, drips into this one. So that keeps water moving, which means that if the bees flip into the water for whatever reason, sudden wind gust comes along, sometimes another bee startles a bee, they flip into the water and they're buzzing on their back doing little loops. If the water surface is moving because you have that drip water going, then that motion moves that bee to the edge and then it gets out and it can recover, and then you don't find a bunch of drowned bees in your drinker. Now, part of what was mentioned here too is the salts. I do put out sea salts too, but I always have fresh water, and then the sea salts are offered separately. And the sea salt demand is different throughout the year. So those are always separate. I don't try to mix a bunch of stuff together. But the salts and minerals, sea salts, Himalayan salts as well, they work pretty darn good. So you got to get it out early. That's why right now it's a good time to be planning for that. Put out your water source for your bees. Because if your neighbors have wading pools and all of a sudden your honeybees are over there, it doesn't matter where those bees came from. They might have come from a mile away. But because you're the person that they know keeps the bees, you get the blame. When those kids go running, even though they're not supposed to run around the swimming pool because they could slip and fall, and they step with their bare feet onto one of those bees and they get stung, it's your fault. It's one of your bees. So, early intervention, provide water for your bees and never let them run out. David Shrewsbury has question number 4. Hey, have a question for you about swarm boxes. I found some foundationless frames that the bees built out into drone comb. I was thinking about putting that in my swarm traps. Do you feel that this would cause the bees to raise drones? Or would the smell attract them to the trap and then they just use it for storage? My thought is they would only use it for storage and would build out other frames for raising worker brood. But I wanted to get your thoughts. Well, these are my thoughts. Drone comb, for those of you who don't know, only raises male bees. The comb is larger. The cells are larger than worker cells. But if it's old, why chuck it? In fact, it's the smell of the old comb, the old beeswax, that will attract those scouts into your swarm box. So I say use them. The other thing you can do is checkerboard it. So you can put the old drone comb, and then you can have a foundationless frame in there, and then more drone comb, and then foundationless frame. Most of your swarm traps are 5 frames, so 10-gallon size is the best. And that's it. They work. Definitely use them. And yeah, they might use it for storage right away. And they'll, of course, draw out their own comb, just as you said. But what we're trying to do with your trap is attract them into the box and get them to set up house there or begin to set up house there. And then you're going to migrate those anyway into another box pretty darn fast. And as I've said over and over before, always have a spare trap ready to replace the one that you take down because swarms come in groups, it seems. Question number 5. Chris Nelson, Beaver Creek, Oregon. You mentioned in today's video that Dawn is now the best wash for varroa mite checks. I hadn't heard this before and couldn't find a reference in previous videos when I did a search. Can you speak to this approach? So here's what I'm going to do. Down in the video description, of course, I'm going to link you to Randy Oliver's study about varroa mite counting and the release options. But it's Dawn Ultra, free and clear. I live in the country. I have a well. We have a septic system. We like to keep the environment clean. So Dawn. And the other thing is, isopropanol became rare over the last year because of COVID. And everybody was using lots of isopropyl alcohol to disinfect or, sanitize things. I don't know what they were doing, but they definitely put a hurt on it. But the good thing was, Dawn Ultra, free and clear. I bought a bunch of this. It's available in a lot of places, Walmart.com, Amazon, wherever you want to get it. A little goes a long way. A tablespoon will make you an entire gallon. It is multi-purpose. Because you can pre-mix it, you can have a gallon of it out there ready to go. And when it comes time to do your mite checks, you use this in place of. See, normally you would put isopropanol in your counter. So let's say you had a varroa mite test counter like this. Once you put your Dawn and mix it up, that stuff can sit on the shelf for the whole year and is ready to go. So whenever you think you want to do a mite count, you bring it out there, dump it in, get your half a cup of bees. That's 300 bees, and you put them in there, and off you go. Scoop your bees, put them in, and it kills the bees right away. Why did this even come up? By the way, this was given to me. Thank you, Ceracell Company. So the thing is, this kills the bees fast. It actually kills the mites faster than isopropanol. And that was tested by Randy Oliver. And you want to get uncomfortable and start losing sleep, then I highly recommend that you make a test. So do a count with the Dawn Ultra, and then do another one and use your isopropanol. And then once you've pulled out the bees and all that's left in here are those varroa mites, look at the ones in the alcohol, look at the ones that are in the Dawn soap. See how long the varroa destructor mites that are in the alcohol survive. It is amazing. The bees are dead, but the varroa mites are still alive. And that's why Randy did this really cool study, practical testing, and found out that the varroa mites were releasing from the bees even without agitation. So you didn't even have to call them names. You didn't have to insult them. You didn't have to call them, that's of course humor. You agitate them this way, not by making fun of the clothes they wear. So anyway, that's it. Instead of isopropanol, use that. And of course, the non-kill method, for those of you who have trouble spotting the queen, and you might actually collect the queen off of that brood frame, because we want the nurse bees, that's where all the varroa destructor mites are hanging out. Powdered sugar method. But you may actually find a higher mite count from the Dawn Ultra because it's a more effective release agent. Isn't that cool? So that's question number 5. Move on to question number 6. Daniel Garrison, Vancouver, Washington. Do you ever use medical gloves when working bees? And if so, what type? Okay, yes I do. And once again, thanks to COVID, we had a hard time getting gloves. I like to use nitrile gloves. There are latex gloves too, and some people have problems with latex. They get a skin rash and they have some allergies. So nitrile gloves are your best bet. Also, they don't have to be medical grade. So I buy these super cheap gloves, nitrile gloves, and they hold up. Here's the thing. Try not to stockpile them. And the reason being that nitrile gloves, if they're over a year old in storage, they start to lose their elasticity, and when you go to pull them on your hands, sometimes you'll grab the cuff here and you go to pull it on and it tears. They tear really easy once they're old. So you want to read the reviews and make sure these things are tough and will last. So what's that do? Keeps your hands clean. Does it protect you from bee stings? No. Does the color of the nitrile glove or the latex gloves that you use, does that matter? Yes. Bees are not that interested in this blue color for some reason. If you can get the white or the cream colored gloves, great choice. Avoid the black ones. Often the black colored or the dark blue ones are sold for mechanics and things like that for obvious reasons. Keep the grease and everything out of your hands, and when you're done you pull them off and you're good to go. But nitrile gloves, blue, white, work great, and they don't solicit stings from the bees. Extremely rare to actually get the bees to sting your hand, but they're not going to protect you if you're clumsy and you're grabbing frames and you squash a bee under your finger. You're going to get stung right through the nitrile glove. But then the beauty of that is when you pull the glove off, the stinger goes with it, so there's none of this credit card scraping and thumbnail scraping and stuff like that to get that stinger out. The quicker you get the stinger out, the less venom gets into your body, the less of a reaction you're going to have. So gloves help you remove stingers too. Plus they keep your hands clean. So what do I choose? The cheapest ones that everybody's not hating on. So read the reviews. Amazon is where I got those. Super handy. If you're a photographer or something, your hands get all sticky when you're doing your hive inspections, then you just take them off, then you touch your camera equipment, and you put another one on. Also, if you need to throw something away, isolate it. If you're taking samples or something, wad them up in the glove, pull the glove inside out, tie it in a knot, Now you throw it away. Question number 7, Anastasia from Stockholm, Sweden. Wow, I just read that right now. I think it's great that people in Sweden are watching this stuff. On the subject of creating a propolis envelope inside the brood box, most suggestions are to rough up the wood of the inside of the box. And have you experimented with this at all? I have a new flow hive, and I wonder what the best way to go about it would be. I've read that you can use cork sheets on the inside of your boxes, and since that is rough, the bees will propolize it nicely. How do you feel about that option? Any downsides to consider? Well, I'm going to stop at that point and say that, well, what's worked for me, first, it's not worth taking really well finished wood like the wood that comes with the flow hives and roughing it up. Because the results for people that have done that, and they use like 80 grit sandpaper and things like that to rough it up, hoping that the bees will recognize that as potentially damaged wood that they need to seal up to protect it from being absorbent, from harboring bacteria and things like that. So propolis that they spread around and glue up all those little joints and openings gets used very little initially. These are my thoughts too. Brand new wood gets propolized very little by the bees because it has moisture content and often has resin of its own already there, especially pine, which a lot of beehives are made out of. As the wood weathers, gets older and starts to crack on the interior, and hopefully you've protected the exterior. The bees are great at doing maintenance on that and adding propolis as the boxes get older. So don't necessarily expect them to do it on something that's brand new. The other thing is, if you're building your own boxes, which is not the case here, but like I source lumber from Amish mills often, and you can have them, they don't surface it really smooth. Like for the Amish, a 2x4 is actually 2 inches by 4 inches. You go to a building center and it's only 1.5 inches thick. So because they've surfaced it down, and it's known as dimensional lumber. So if you can get that from Amish or a lumber yard, and you can get them to leave it rough cut on the interior surface, the bees will propolize that really nice. And they did that on my feeder shims too. So they actually propolize the overhead first, and of course any joints and cracks, and then they work on the surfaces last. So the older boxes get more propolis. So the next thing is, what if you wanted to encourage them to do that? Well, there is something called a propolis trap. Dr. Marla Spivak has done a pile of research on that, and they put these propolis traps, which the original intent of that propolis trap is to have it on the top of your hive and, of course, get the bees to seal it up as they try to block out light and things like that. And they do that by putting a whole bunch of propolis on there. Then you pull the trap out and you're harvesting the propolis because a lot of people use it as a medicinal. But you can also take the propolis traps. They're not cheap though. They're about $7 a piece. And you can attach them to the interior inner, so it's redundant, but the inside walls of your beehive, usually the sides. And they're going to reduce the available space in there. That's why you tend not to put them on the interior front or back, but rather the side walls, and this increases the amount of propolis that's inside the hive. Therefore, the hive becomes an antibacterial sanctuary for your bees. And off you go. So that's another option. Should you put cork in there? And yes, I have sheets of cork. Guess what? It's been my experience that the bees do. And cork comes in rolls, and it's really thin. It's like 3/16 of an inch thick. Sometimes it's 1/8. And you can glue that to the interior surface of your beehive bodies. But the bees often identify that as a material that's in decay. So if it were like the interior of an old tree and the wood's getting a little pulpy, honeybees instinctively chew that away. So if you put in cork, instead of propolizing it, they may actually chew away the cork, and you'll see bits and pieces of cork being hauled out your landing board. So even though it could work, often it does not work because the bees consider that not to be solid wood, and therefore they're insecure with it and they start to remove it. So propolis traps, rough cut lumber, and of course don't go necessarily overboard trying to encourage your bees to produce more propolis inside the hive. There are bees that are known to produce more propolis than they need and to cover every surface So even depending on the stock that you select to keep and raise can impact how much they are involved in propolis production. So they collect it from the trees, it's resin, it's sap, and so on from the area that you live in. And then of course they're bringing that in and they can't even get it off their own legs. They need help to do it. And then they start packing it in corners and they pull it on the bottom of your hive in the back and they stick it to the interior surface of your inner cover. And then they move it around a lot. So good stuff, but I don't know if I would go way down the rabbit hole trying to make them produce it. But those are some of the things that we could think about regarding propolis. And salute to Marla Spivak and her team for all the great work that they're doing. Question number 8 comes from Tom Damore, and it says, can you put ProSweet liquid into the rapid feeder? I'm concerned that bees may drown in it. That's a very good concern. So for those of you who don't know, some people, I don't know if I'm just not saying it clearly or what, some people say, how about those wraparound feeders? These are considered rapid round because they're easy to fill quick and they're round. So when you put liquid in it, they've got the center cover right here. I don't recommend you put anything thicker or more viscous in this than 1-to-1 sugar syrup. And usually that's to kick off a swarm that you've just hived, or maybe you did a split, you're trying to help them out. So it's just to kick them off when we're not in the nectar flow. And it's in a colony that you're not going to be harvesting honey for human consumption from, because there's the potential, especially if you put 2-to-1 in this, they tend to store 2-to-1. So 1-to-1 they tend to utilize right away, and if the bees get in it, because they're going to go down these sides here, and if it has a highly viscous open surface area there, as you would with 2-to-1 or ProSweet is about 20% moisture. So it is just like honey. It is incredibly viscous. So any bee that lands on ProSweet in here risks dying right there. So thinner syrup, bees get in and out of it. If they fall in, they're able to get out quickly. They can swim out. If it's 2-to-1 or close to that, or if it's ProSweet, full strength, or even if it's honey, don't put honey in here either, because you'll have a pile of dead bees in there. So thin syrup only, I'm glad that question was asked, because it is something that's important to talk about. So then what could you feed that if you had ProSweet and you wanted to get it into the bees to get them started? These are very good feeders. They have the holes in the lid. Fill that with ProSweet, invert it, no bees, no surface area they can't get in. There's zero drowning. Bee Smart Designs upgraded their drinkers. These are the new ones that just came out. This holds an entire gallon. So if you've got a big brood that's kicked off and everything, you need to provide them with heavy resources. These tanks now are very firm, so they don't settle. In the past, sometimes they mushroom down a little bit and express fluid out. So these now can handle full strength, full weight ProSweet. It holds a whole gallon. And then you just have the little openings in the middle here. So just like the holes on the bottom of your mason jars, the bees can't get in it, no drowning. And then so I haven't used these yet because it just came out, but I can tell already you can't even compress it with your hands. So job well done. These are going to be the strongest. They work inside the hive on top of your inner cover, and you can also put them on your horizontal hives. So I like it for that. The Lands hive has no room for feeders on top of the frames, and the frames are put together so close. I'm getting a lot of questions about the Lands hive. The way they're designed, they're not designed to accommodate feeders at all. You can put in a frame feeder if you have a Lands hive, but that requires you to open the hive and get in there and access it. This is a frame feeder for a Lands hive, and it's the only way that you can really offer auxiliary feed for your Lands hives. Unless you've got other Lands hives and you've got frames full of honey and you can take from the strong and feed the weak and so on, those are your options. And by the way, same rule, bees can drown in these. So there's an open surface area there, so keep your syrup light in those feeders. So that was an easy one to answer, but good food for thought too, because some people may be curious. James Knoll. Three-frame extractor spins out one side at a time. Will it make a difference which way you load them? Top bar towards the center or top bar out towards the drum? It does make a difference. First of all, there's two kinds of extractors I want to talk about. The first is the radial extractor, and that's the one we're talking about here. So I'm going to use this green drone comb frame as my example. So when this goes into the extractor, if it's a radial extractor, that means there's a center hub and the frames go in this way. The back of the frame, the top of the frame when it's in the hive, is on the outer circumference. So the bottom goes towards the inside and then they spin like this. So that's a radial extractor. The reason that's important is because when you look at the frames as they are in the hive, the cells on the beeswax do not come straight out on a horizontal plane. They're actually on an incline. What's the incline? Think of Friday the 13th, a scary movie. 13 degrees up. Now that means that when it's tipped on its side and we're trying to fling the honey out of it with centrifugal force, we need to have that up angle out. And that's why they should only go in there one way. Most of your radial extractors are already designed to accommodate this little ear right here. There'll be a notch there and it goes down in it. The tangential extractors, that's ones where they go in this way, your center hub is here, and as they spin out, the face goes out. And then once you've spun it all out, you flip it, put it back in, and then you spin out the other side. So for a lot of backyard beekeepers, you might get an extractor, either manual crank or a motorized version that can handle either radial or tangential. And the baskets are made to accommodate it either way. But radial extractors hold more frames historically. But I found that the tangential extractors clean out the cells better earlier with less RPMs. So if you're hand cranking, it can make a difference. Empties them right out. But yeah, to answer this question, it definitely makes a difference. The back of the frame, which is the top of the frame when it's in the hive, faces out, away from the central axis. Next is Charles Trotter. Have you ever heard of using a queen excluder on the very bottom next to the landing board or bottom board to stop absconding? First of all, what does it mean to abscond? It means to head out, to leave, to depart, to go away, to never return. Sometimes an entire colony of bees will leave the hive empty and they will have absconded. Who does that? Well, maybe you caught a swarm and you put them in a new hive and you brought it to your apiary and they're kind of unsettled because they haven't decided yet if they like where they're living. So they have a tendency to abscond, just depart, get out of there. Maybe you forgot to put one of those sweet feeders on there. Maybe you didn't provide for them. Maybe they don't like the smell of the interior of the hive because it doesn't have any previously used beeswax in there. So we need to trap them. We need to keep them there against their will until they decide it's a great place to live. And by the time Stockholm Syndrome sets in, they stay. They like it. They decide they always wanted to be there. But can you do that with a physical barrier? Yes, you can. Where is it? Oh, look, I just happen to have one. This is a queen excluder and an entrance blocker. See that? It's wooden. Sits right on the landing board. Goes right up against the hive body, which is your brood box, which is where you've put them. Now the workers can come and go and they can start to forage, but guess who can't leave? The queen. She's stuck in there. She's stuck in there long enough to hopefully commit herself to laying eggs in the frames or to give the workers time enough to produce comb. And then the queen starts to lay in the cells that they've made. Once that happens, then you can take this off and now drones can also get in and out. But yeah, it exists. Here it is. Where can you get one? I looked around for these things and I only found it actually at the Blythewood Bee Company. I haven't thought about the Blythewood Bee Company for a long time. These are $7.75, which is pretty darn cheap because that's a metal queen excluder. It looks like they're set in here with silicone. And the reason the wood has this color is because I finished it with Eco Wood. So a mineral finish for the wood. But yeah, they make them. Good to have a few of them around. I have a few of them around. Especially when you're starting with brand new equipment. So if you've collected a swarm and you're going to hive them in a hive that's all brand new, never been used before, they could actually take off again. But once you're certain the queen is in there, that's the other key. Make sure she's in there. And then once you have that queen, you can put that on there for a few days and make sure that they're sticking around. So, good question, by the way. Last question. Wow, is it really? That was question number 10. Now we're on to question number 11, last question of the day. So, Robin Coolidge, Lancaster, Ohio. I'm a new beekeeper with a flow hive currently overwintering in central Ohio. I'm going to add 2 more hives this spring, and I'm wondering about insulated hives. The 3 that I'm researching are polystyrene hives, namely Paradise and Superior hives, and the Apamai insulated hives. Apamai, I'm not sure how to pronounce that. I really liked the features of the Apamai, but they're also a lot more expensive than the others. Do you have any experience or have any advice on insulated hives? Any feedback on the best choice? I have lots of feedback. So I like to talk about stuff, even if I don't own any. So, full disclosure, the only insulated hive I own right now is the Layens hive, insulated by lamb's wool. And that's not what we're talking about here. The options are Apamai or polystyrene. Now the thing is, I do have a favorite because I pay attention to this stuff. I've tried to keep, I have a lot of plastic in my apiary already. I mean, I've got flow frames out there. I'm trying to limit the plastic. I do put insulated hives on top of insulated hives. Insulated telescoping covers on all of my Langstroth style hives. I've even taken off those beautiful gabled roofs from the flow hives, and I've put insulated BMAX exterior telescoping covers on. Now the reason I arrived at BMAX is because when you grab the polystyrene or what's called poly hives, you'll find that they have a lot of different densities. Now, the harder it is, the more dense they are, the less insulating they are. So it's kind of a trade-off. They need to be tough enough to hold up to bee equipment handling. This is why you probably don't see a pile of them being used by commercial beekeepers, because polystyrene hives can't take all the abuse that they're going to be exposed to when they migrate the covers and they migrate the whole hives and everything else. So that's why they kind of go with woodenware and they like to standardize everything. But if I were buying a polystyrene hive, based on all the people I've spoken with, all the hives I've looked at yet not owned, the BMAX hives. I think they're also made, Lyson makes a good one, but BMAX, I was impressed with how tough they are. Now for me, they're not an option for a lot of reasons. One, my bees are getting through winters fine without these heavy insulated hives. Number 2, I have free-ranging chickens, and chickens eat polystyrene. All I need is one chicken to peck at it a little bit, and they all line up and they're eating polystyrene. So that's a no-go. They'll even fly up and land on top of a beehive and peck at the polystyrene lid. So you have to make sure and paint them up and make them look unappealing. I don't know what's going on with chickens, but so that's another downside. Now, guess what I'm doing with every week now in my Q&As? I'm giving a shout out, right? So if somebody has a video that covers ground that I need to get covered in one of my questions, I'm going to give a shout out to another channel. And this is never going to be one of the big channels that has 1 million subscribers and all that stuff. It's going to be somebody else that I think is doing a great job. So today, I'm going to send you to an Apamai hive review. The channel is called, get your pencils ready, Bruce's Bees. BRUCESBEES. And he has a he has the Apamai hive, and it's been in use. That's important to me. I didn't want to send you to somebody who was just starting out, just putting it together, showing you how cool they look. I looked at Bruce's video this afternoon before I mentioned it here. And his hive has been in use, and they're kind of grungy looking. So I want you to see what they look like after they've been out there for a while. So go to Bruce's Bees, tell him I said hello, wish him a happy Friday, and give his Apamai hive video a thumbs up. from me and from you and from the whole beekeeping community out there. Say hey. So that's it for today. That's the fluff section. Get out there, by the way. If you're in the cold as we are, if you're in the Northeast at all, you've been hit with heavy snow. It took me a lot of time just to walk around in the bee yard because I don't wear snowshoes. My wife wears snowshoes, which did not help her. She went out to the mailbox and fell over the big snow berm in her snowshoes, and I did not get a video of it because that would have been super funny. Anyway, go out there. It is way over knee deep, and a lot of the hives, and I'll show you the sequences at the end when we close out tonight, and you can see what things look like, but we are scraping dead bees off the bottoms. I also did a demonstration in that video where I pulled out the entrance, the hive gates. We pulled that out, and there was an air passage through the hive gates, but there were also dead bees on them, so I pulled one out, shook the dead bees off, cleared out the landing board behind it, the bottom board, and then put the hive gate back in there. If you don't know what that is, the hive gate, that's these little plastic entrances, these channels. Darn it, I don't have them handy. I can't believe that. But so we're evaluating those through the year. They do have to be cleaned out. Don't just trust that it looks clear at the entrance. Pull them out, shake them clear, stick them back in. And while they're out, clear out your landing boards for those of you who are evaluating those with me. And expect this spring, if you're part of the HiveGate Citizen Science group, expect to get an email from me, and you're going to get a Survey Monkey. And we're going to want to know what you observed, what you liked, what you didn't. Did they keep wasps and hornets out, and did your bees do okay? Did they impact your honey yields? Did your bees swarm normally? Were they able to do everything that they do in a normal hive? And that has been the consensus so far that they all did. Those of you who are that in Washington State that historically have lost piles of beehives, colonies, to wasps, we're very happy with the HiveGate entrances because they cut way down on those wasp raids, and they did not lose colonies to the wasps. So win-win right there. But that's coming up in the spring again. So I think that's it for today. I think we covered the ground. And if you haven't seen it already, I did an interview yesterday with the inventor of Hive Alive. So that's the supplement that helps our bees improve their gut health, and they suppress the nosema spores that are right now attacking untreated colonies or colonies that might be weakened due to poor diet and things like that. This is the time of year when people get excited because you go out in your bee yard and yes, they're alive, but just be well reasoned about that because we're not out of the woods. We're going to have to check on the bees, make sure they have surplus food on, make sure that they've got emergency rations. This is the time of year when people get excited thinking their bees are alive and doing well, only to have them starve out in the next 2 or 3 weeks. And then by the time pollen starts coming in, they don't have the numbers left inside the hive to send out those foragers and multitask inside the hive, which is retain the brood, feed the brood, and attend to the queen and keep her alive. So we need enough bees in there to do multiple tasks at once. The general rule of thumb is 5,000 or more bees so they can have that distribution of labor that they need to survive. So thank you for being here with me today. Thanks for spending your time. And watch that interview, please, with Dara Scott, the inventor and developer of Hive Alive. It was really eye-opening. I did not realize that the Hive Alive formula was also proving to have an impact on American foul brood. So, interesting stuff. Thanks for watching. Have a fantastic weekend. So as promised, this is bonus footage. This is this afternoon when I was walking around out there looking at the landing boards, and you can see we have lots of deep snow. This is way over 2 feet deep. Those are my most distant Langstroth hives. The snow's banked around them, but it clears up around the base. We're also going to look at some of the entrances. We're going to clean them out and look at some of the bee counts there. Also, I've added a hive visor to that one. A week ago it did not have one. I found out it makes a big difference if they're on. Horizontal long Langstroth hive does not need the landing board cleared, and look how the snow just blows out around it. Could have something to do with the configuration of the support system, hive number 11. The dead bees on the front, it's actually a good sign. Can't have dead bees if they weren't alive inside at one point. So we're using our handy Shrew Slayer slant entrance cleaner here. You get these from Better Bee. They're made by Bee Smart Designs, just in case you haven't seen them yet. They reach all the way to the back, and I highly recommend that you pull out as many of the dead bees as you can, because the more you pull out, the fewer there are in there to smell and send up a stink, and they won't hold moisture, and you won't have to employ your Undertaker bees right away when we do get a nice warm day. I'm sure that's coming. We just know it. But the other thing is we can look at these tags. That's number 11. And so we'll be able to compare in the spring when they start flying. We'll see how many of them died off and what was going on there. Now, interesting thing. This particular colony does not have Hive Alive on it. Look at all the dead bees. Now that's not alarming. That's not a lot, actually. Considering we haven't had a cleansing flight day yet, that's fine. Those are a bunch of old feeder shims there. Here's another one I cleaned out. That little collection of dead bees, not bad at all. The yellow bits and pieces that you see here are because they're chewing off the caps and they're getting into their old stored pollen, and they're also getting into their upper feeders. Hive 12. We're going to be able to follow up on that in the spring too. Let's do a top down here. Feeder shim on top, insulated inner cover, medium super with honey, hive visor, and then we have this entrance reducer. See, I'm trying to hook it so I can pull it out. Kind of concerned about the plastic hive entrance cleaning tool here, so I decided maybe I'll pull on it really strong and see if I can't pull that hive gate out of there. If you want to know more about the hive gates and what this experiment even is, please go to fredsfinefowl.com and look at the hive gate. And pull that out. There's a little post there that I hooked on, and wow, I'm impressed. The hive cleaning tool handled that. Now there are dead bees here, but if we look down the channel, there was still airflow through there. And I'm trying to give you a look in here. There was a channel of air, but this is the time to knock those dead bees out. Make sure it's nice and clear. Hopefully we get a warm day. We haven't had one for a long time, but while this is out, you also want to reach in, use your hive cleaning, landing board cleaning tools, and get as many dead bees out as you can. So we'll see. Reaches almost to the back. Got some good dead bees there. Again, look at the little bits and pieces on the bottom. These numbers are not terrible. So if this is what your hives look like and you're in the cold, you're in the Northeast, don't panic yet. We're really looking at 50 or 60 bees there. That is not bad considering I'm pulling them out from all the way in the back. And remember, this is a hive gate, so this is the first time this year I've even pulled this out. So all the dead bees that are back in there could potentially have been there since the last cleansing flight day. Also, when they do their cleansing flights, we get the warm day. They don't necessarily haul out their dead. They're more concerned about eliminating outside of the hive and getting resources. Sometimes they'll be out leaking melting snow and things like that. So the Undertaker bees hauling out dead bees would be something they do after all of their critical activities are satisfied. So that's how you do that. Pull it right out, shake it clean, clean the landing board, bottom board, and restore it. So number 18 here, I cleaned those out. We got little bits and pieces. You might think that looks like varroa mites, little brown specks there in the snow. But there were not any varroa mites. Those are just bits and pieces of propolis and wax and materials that you normally find inside. If there are varroa mites and they're alive, then they're probably in there on the bodies of bees. Just a little artistic look out here at what's going on to the east of my apiary. All the evergreen trees are providing habitat for the wild bees. Good, not wild bees, but the wild birds. They can find sanctuary in the snowstorms that we've had. As you can see, it's just still coming down. We have several feet of snow. And this is in Pennsylvania, for those of you who don't know already. Northwest Pennsylvania, 1,300 feet above sea level. So high number 18. Now there's a vent here, right? So they're not in jeopardy of not getting enough air. But I want to see if there's dead bees, and I want to clean them out for them. This has a hive visor on it, so one of the ways that it helps to keep the snow off that entrance. But that's evidence of a colony that is alive. That's for sure. And again, that's number 18, so we'll be able to follow up on that. This colony does not have hive alive on it. Just wanted you to get a feel for the cold, the isolation. And that is a BeeSmart hive stand. I had to put a 2x4 shim on it to get it high enough off the ground so that skunks cannot harass this beehive. Insulated inner cover, Beemax outer cover, no feeder shim. The red things that you see are motion activated at night, and they make a lot of noise. There's no electric fence around the hive, around the apiary. Wouldn't matter in the wintertime anyway. The bears are hibernating. By the way, I don't know if you realize when bears hibernate, they also don't go to the bathroom inside their den. They reabsorb it. They reabsorb their waste material, including urine. Did you know? Well, now you do. Look at that. From a distance, it looks like those hives are buried. Really, the snow just piled around them and did not fill up right up against the hive body. The entrances are already open, so they're vented on their own without me cleaning them out. And this is a flow hive, feeder shim on top. This does have hive alive on it. And a full super of honey going into winter there. This is hive number 16. Now, just because the snow banked up completely against the front does not mean they're dead. Now, if it was a dead out, I would expect to find way more dead bees in the bottom. Now, with the hive alive fondant on it, look at how few the dead bees are in here. So this is what I was talking about earlier in the week when people were asking. I would say that's an indicator that they're doing much better than those without the hive alive fondant. So the control is those with just sugar, and then we have others that have no surplus feed on at all. But look at the number of bees there, not very many, and that's the first time I've scraped that out in 2 weeks. Beemax cover, and we're back at number 18 there. The deer can't even stand to be in this backyard. It lights up like crazy. I have cameras out here that are holding up in winter also, and it just looks like a red flashing light show at night, and you can hear all the noises going off. It's ultrasonic as well as audible to people, so above 20,000 cycles per second and below makes all the noise necessary to drive people nuts. Don't use them next to your house or you'll be waking up all the time. The deer have eaten all of our holly bushes too this year. They're having troubles. We have deep snow, so they're chewing bark. They're eating everything. They eat the evergreens. There's a camera right there. If you look close, that's the Arlo 4 Pro. So they have spotlights that come on too, so you can see in color at night. And those noisemakers are solar powered, so they charge back up, and they have an internal battery. Feeder shim on top, so it has hive alive, insulated inner cover. Number 8, look, it looks like they're all dead, right? There's no entrance, no opening. But I don't think they're dead. I just think they're quiet. Some more clean outs here. Got the screen in there. Here's the thing. If they're dead, none of them fell to the bottom board. Yeah, 1, 2, I'll be very impressed if these guys make it. But they have the advantage too. We'll see. There's my nucleus colonies, double-deckers, surrounded in snow. Their entrances are not clogged and they're insulated on the top. Can't wait to see what they do in spring. Hope you enjoyed the bonus footage. Have a great weekend. Thanks for watching. Keep your entrances clear.